Hello everyone, here is Landos again, and today I got something special for you guys. I loved playing this build. I'm currently level 93 and I think I will continue probably till 95 or 96. It's a crit elemental Frostblades Inquisitor, and to be honest I think it's a bit too strong, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the Inquisitor Ascendancy nerfed pretty soon, but until then, let's have some fun with it. While I'm talking, you'll see all kinds of maps and bosses, tier 10, 13, 14, because the strength of being an Inquisitor is that your damage will never fall off, because while critting you ignore elemental resistances thanks to the inevitable judgment, and that makes rolling maps a lot easier, makes you faster because you're not afraid by basically anything in the game. So it's basically like being a chaos build, almost. Well, not really, and here comes the downside of being an Inquisitor, which is Reflect. The best option you have to deal with Reflect is a Winter's Flask plus Valpite. Even if nerfed, this flask is still giving you 20% lightning damage leeched as life, which is a ton of damage, plus the 2% attack leech I get from the passive skill tree. That means you will instantly leech back more than what the rare mob reflects to you. Of course, running a reflect map is out of question, because for that you should have the flask up 100% of the time. Other than the winters, the utility flasks I'm using are a diamond flask with freeze immunity to boost my crit chance by a lot, a silver flask with shock immunity to get the onslaught, and lastly the Rumis concoction. But talking about flasks, you might have already noticed that I don't use power charges with this character, and that's because I use Poacher's mark for the 100% increased flask charges gained from enemies cursed instead of using Assassin's mark. I must admit that in the past I was one of those that didn't like Poacher's mark at all, but now I think it's actually one of the strongest curses in the game. I can keep my flasks up almost permanently for the entire map run, gives me frenzy charges, and lowers enemies' evasion, which makes building a crit character a lot easier because you need slightly less accuracy to hit mobs. Lastly, you're probably wondering why the hell am I self-casting Molten Shell. That's because I want to proc the Instruments of Virtue as much as I can for the 40% increased attack damage if you have cast a spell recently, on top of having the 10% increased attack speed all the time because I'm whirling around, and because you also get 20% increased cast speed if you have attacked recently. The casting time of Molten Shell is probably even lower than the Enduring Cry one. Now it's time to take a look at my gear, but first of all I want to say that if you don't have a Winter's Flask, Anaziri's Promise is fine until you get one, but make sure to get a Winter's for the really end game, because at that point the Reflect starts to be just too much to handle just with Anaziri's Promise. But anyway, the weapon we want is a sword, a rapier, if you go for a one-handed sword, because it has more range than the other swords, or a two-handed sword is fine. It's really strong, I tried it. The problem is that you have less life because you can't use a shield and you can't use whirling blades, so it's actually a lot better to use a one-handed sword, but you can choose what you want. Then you want attack speed on your gloves if you go for rare gloves, or you can use the Maligaros. You want weapon elemental damage on your rings, amulet and belt. I don't have weapon elemental damage on my rings, but that will really increase my damage a lot. If you don't have that, try to get something like flat lightning damage. Then you want a Rat's Nest, really strong. We don't use power charges, so we want as much global critical strike chance as we can get. So for that reason the Maligaros are probably the best choice, but I really like the higher life. Some mobs in higher tier maps really can one-shot you, so at this level of life I never get one-shot. I don't say it's impossible, but it never happened to me. Anyway, then I have normal rare boots. You don't need movement speed on your boots. That really helps a lot you to have good resistances on your boots. A evasion shield with as much life as you can, and the chest I have an hybrid armor and evasion, but you want ideally a full evasion chest if you go for a rare chest, or you can use a lightning coil, a belly of the beast, a Doris's defiance. That's up to you. Now about my gem links, I have the GMP, cast when damage taken, Arctic Breath on my sword. I really didn't know what to put here actually. Probably a defensive curse with cast when damage taken would be better, something like Warlord's Mark or Enfeeble. Then Blood Magic, Fortify, faster attacks and Whirling Blades. Molten Shell, self-casted. It's cool because it gives you some armor and it deals a lot of damage, as you can see. Then here I have the Enduring Cry and Summonous Golem, the cast when damage taken, Immortal Call, and increased duration and Ball Haste. Then on my gloves I have the Herald Device, Curse on Hit, Poacher's Mark and Wrath. I'm using Herald Device instead of Herald of Thunder because it's not like cursing with Assassin's Mark, where you can just curse a couple of mobs and you're going to get your power charges forever basically. Here you want to curse as many mobs as possible to get all the Flask charges you can get. Lastly, the main setup is Frostblades, increased critical strikes, multi-strike, added lightning damage, weapon elemental damage and faster attacks. Of course, I didn't mention it, but you can use it with lightning strike if you want. It's a green gem, so you can switch it when you want. I tried it and I think it's absolutely trash tier compared to Frostblades for the end game at least, or I think it's actually bad at any point in the game compared to Frostblades, but it actually deals a lot more damage for the single target. So if you want, you could switch it for something like a Palace Dominus boss fight, so you just use it for the second form and you deal a ton more damage. But switching gems, it's not something I really like to do, but you're getting a ton of damage anyway, even with Frostblades. So let's see my actual DPS. If I use my Summonous Golem, I do a Whirling Blades, all my buffs are up. I go to 140k basically, plus the Val Haste, it's something like 168, something like that, plus if I have the endurance charges, if I have Fortify, things like that, I get more buffs, which means I also get more damage with the Mantra of Flames. Now let's go see my passive skill tree. I of course start from the Templar, like I said, because I want the Inquisitor. Let's see the actual minor points. On the Inquisitor you get elemental damage and attack speed, on the way for Instruments of Virtue, which is what I already talked about. Then you get some critical strike multiplier and elemental damage. This point right here is insane with the Victors, because you always one-shot things, because you always have the 45% crit multi when you attack enemies, because they are always shocked. Then we have some more crit multi and elemental damage on the way for Inevitable Judgment. Now let's see the actual points on the passive skill tree. You start from the elemental damage, then you take melee damage, retribution, discipline training, elementalist, really good for capping your resistances. Also some weapon elemental damage, life with devotion, helps also increasing a bit the damage of wrath. Then you take a jewel socket. Ideally you would want some projectile speed somewhere on your jewels, but that's not really important. It's strong. I wouldn't say it's not strong to have some projectile speed, but it's really the last thing you want. You first want crit multi, attack speed and life. So disemboweling for crit multi, crit and crit chance. Then you go for Constitution, Sentinel, another jewel socket. This is the best spot to place a static electricity because you get 1 to 82 lightning damage with it. This is not that strong for a static electricity. I'm not really sure about how much you can get. Actually, we can, as you can see, 40 damage less with this spot right here. So I wouldn't recommend taking more than one static electricity. It's not really going to help you a lot. But anyway, then you go for the melee range, the life and attack speed accuracy with Art of the Gladiator. The life leech and mana leech, you just need the 0.4 mana leech from this hybrid point to sustain your mana cost. Then crit with blades, crit multi also. Then you want forces of nature for some elemental damage. Of course the penetration is not doing anything for us, but it's 40% elemental damage, which is a lot for 3 points. Then a herbalism, life, a frenzy charge, the jewel I showed you before, crit multi, the acrobatics. I don't take phase acrobatics, you can take it if you want. I don't think it's actually that useful because you don't want to phase tank spells, you just want to avoid spells with whirling blades. And then suddenly I need a plus 32 intelligence. You can get that from your gear. That's something you probably would want to drop if you can. And the Valpact, absolutely needed. The reflect, like I said, is basically the only issue with this build. Then I have a Mantra of Flames, really insane for damage, I need to say, because the 5 to 20 is the best roll, and I have like something like 10 buffs up all the time running, plus I mean from my flasks, plus my auras, plus the molten shell, the the ice golem gives me a buff. I get the endurance charges. Then on the shadow, the coordination, blood siphon, trickery, assassination, and elemental focus. Really standard stuff for like any crit build. So thank you guys all for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It was my crit elemental Frostblades Inquisitor build. I like this build a lot. I think it's one of the strongest melee builds out there at the moment, and I would like to know what you think about it. So let me know in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys!